Hi everyone, this is Dr. Jazayeri, and we're going to cover anatomy and physiology of cardiovascular systems in this chapter. So, after this chapter, you should be able to know the basics of the medical terminology that are used in the heart disease space, know the anatomy of the heart, and also know about the blood vessels. First, we're going to start some medical terminology. If you scan this QR code, this is a free resource for medical terminology book. You will see the cardiovascular chapter, and you can get familiarized with the common terminology that is used, and we're going to cover them in this chapter more in depth. Some of the prefixes that you need to know that are important to be familiar with are hyper, which means excessive and above, hypo, which means below or deficient. We have a term called inter, which means between something, between two structures, for example. Pan means all, that includes all. For example, when we say pancarditis, means that there's inflammation of all the heart layers. We have peri, which means surrounding and around, like pericardium, which is the layer around the heart. We have poly, which means many or excessive or over. We have tachy. Tach means fast, like tachycardia, when the heart beats faster than usual. We call it tachycardia. We have a term called tri, which means three, and that's important because we use this tri and also bi, which means two, to explain to name the valves of the heart. When we have a single a before a word, that usually means absence. We have Brady, which is opposite of tachy, which means slow. We have this. Whenever we see dys at the beginning of a word, that usually means something is abnormal or something is painful, or it's generally that's bad. The word endo, endo, means inside something or within something. The word or the prefix epi means on something, over something, usually means the outer layer. And then we talked about inter. So these are some terminology that we will see around the chapter, and you will read in the textbook. Cardiovascular, which you can see it's made of two words: cardio, which means heart, and vascular, which means the blood vessels. So that's how you can guess the name of the cardiovascular. It refers to the heart and the blood vessels at the same time. We have cardiovascular diseases, which are disease processes that are related to the heart or blood vessels. For an acronym, we use CVD. That's very common, and you will see it in the patient charts. And that can include any of the heart diseases that we can have. It can be a arrhythmia. A means absence of rhythmia. Rhythmia means that if the heart is beating on a sequence or no, or it's out of sequence, it's out of rhythm. So that's arrhythmia. We have hypertension. Again, hyper means excessive of high, and tension is about the blood pressure. So if we have hypertension, means that we have high blood pressures. There's another terminology of one of the procedures that we do that is called electrocardiogram. Electro means electricity, cardio means heart, and gram means graph, means drawing. It's abbreviated for ECG. Many people and historically also call it EKG. That was a German terminology for it that is carried over to the medical literature. So if you see ECG or EKG, they both are the same. And what that does means that you can attach some patches to the patient body, and that's what you will learn to do, and that will measure and that will graph the heart electric activity. We have electrophysiology, also known as EP study, and that's also measures the heart electric activity, but more accurately. We have Holter monitoring, which is when we attach a monitor to the patient that can trace the heart rates and the electric activity over a period of time. The patient can go home with this Holter monitor for 1, 2, or 3 days and then come back, and then the physician will look at all that EKG signals to find if there was something wrong. We have atrial fibrillation. Atrial is one of the chambers of the heart that we will review together, and fibrillation means basically vibrating, meaning that instead of the atrial muscles to be able to squeeze down, they are not able to squeeze and they are just vibrating. We have bradycardia. Again, brady is one of those prefixes that we need to know, which means slow, and cardia is about the heartbeat. So if we have a very slow heart rate, that's bradycardia. Tachycardia is exactly the opposite. If we have a high heart rate, that's called tachycardia. Cardioversion is when we use some electric shocks to restore the normal heart rhythm for the patients. You may hear about echocardiogram. The echocardiogram is the ultrasound, which uses the sound waves to look at the heart. So like this, similar to the ultrasound that we can look at the abdomen and we can look at other structures. If we use the ultrasound to look at the heart, they call it echocardiogram. So let's have a review of the anatomy of the heart. The cardiovascular system, which is the heart and the blood vessels. We first start with the heart. The human heart has 4 chambers, it has 4 rooms, which function together to be able to pump the blood to the body and also receive the blood from the body. So the blood has to be circulating at all time to us to be able to function. There are 2 types of blood vessels that in the body generally. We call them either artery or vein. Artery, which usually is in red in any picture that you look at, anything or any blood vessel that carries the blood out of the heart, that's called an artery. Any vessel that carries the blood to the heart, that's called veins. There are special arteries called coronary arteries, which is a very common question to ask. The coronary arteries are the arteries that are responsible to give blood to the muscles of the heart. So those coronary arteries are important to remember, and they are the first branches of the aorta. And aorta, which is the biggest artery in the human body, is this big curvature structure that we see here. Now, usually all the arteries have a blood that is oxygenated, meaning that it has a high value of oxygen in it. That's usually because the pulmonary arteries, which you see them, these are blue here, these are the arteries that come from that move the blood out of the right side of the heart, and they move it to the lungs. Pulmonary means lungs. The arteries that carry the blood to the lung, the blood in them doesn't have a high oxygen level, and that's because it goes to the lung. So when we breathe, the oxygen goes to the blood and comes back to the left side of the heart. And that's why when you see these 4 red structures, pulmonary veins, again long veins, they are colored in red because they have a high oxygen level, but they are vein because they are carrying the blood to the heart. Okay, so that's something that can be a little confusing, but we need to understand and know about the heart. The heart itself is basically a very big muscle, and it has 3 main layers. It has the inside layer, which is called endocardium. Again, you don't need to memorize it, but you can understand that endo means inside and cardium means heart. So that's inside the heart. We have myocardium. Myo means muscle. So this is the muscle of the heart, which is the layer in the middle. And then we have a pericardium or epicardium. The pericardium has two layers itself. So it has a visceral pericardium, which is attached to the myocardium, and we have a parietal pericardium. That parietal, it means it's on the periphery, it's outside. And that parietal pericardium, which is the outside layer of the pericardium, is the outermost layer of the heart. The heart, we said that it has 4 chambers. 2 chambers of the top are called atrium. 2 chambers at the bottom are called ventricles. The atriums are the chambers of the heart that receive the blood. So to make it easy, we're going to start from the right side of the heart. So the right atrium receives blood from all over the body. From the head to the toe, the blood, when it wants to go back to the heart, it first enters into the right atrium. For blood to stay in it, it has to have a valve. The valve that is between the right atrium and the right ventricle is called tricuspid valve. Tri means 3, and cuspid is each of those leaflets. If you look here, this is the tricuspid valve because it has 3 leaflets. When the blood goes into the right atrium fills, and then it empties into the right ventricle. The right ventricle is the part of the heart that can pushes the blood out. So the ventricles are bigger part of the muscle. They are more strong. So when the heart squeezes, the blood from the right ventricle goes to the lung, because it's the blood that's coming from the body, so it doesn't have nutrients, it doesn't have oxygen, and it has to go to the lung so it can exchange the oxygen with the air that we breathe, and it become oxygenated to come back and go to other parts of the body. When the right ventricle is squeezing, it's sending the blood to the lungs. What structure carries the blood out? It's an artery. Where is it going? It's going to the lung. Another name for the lung is pulmonary. So there's called pulmonary artery. What valve is between the pulmonary artery and right ventricle? They call it pulmonary valve. So it's easy to remember. When the blood goes to the lungs and it changes the oxygen, it becomes oxygenated, it comes back now to the left side of the heart, which receives the oxygenated blood in the left atrium again. The first chamber that receives the blood are the atrium. The left chamber receives the blood, and then it empties into the left ventricle. The valve, which is between the left atrium and left ventricle, is called bicuspid valve. It has another name, also known as mitral valves. So 2 names for the same structure. When the left ventricle squeezes to send the blood out, it is sending the blood to the aorta, and the aorta carries the blood out to all parts of the body. The valve, which is between the aorta and the left ventricle, is again called aortic valve. So that nomenclature and the name of the structures are very, very intuitive to understand. So you just need to practice it a little to be familiar with the structure. So to recap, the heart has 4 chambers, the atriums on the top and the ventricles on the bottom. The blood first goes to the right side of the heart, right atrium, to the right ventricle. It goes out to the lungs or pulmonary system, comes back to the heart in the left side, and then leaves the heart to the aorta that goes to other parts and every part of our body. Now, we briefly talked about that we have arteries and veins. We talked that arteries are the vessels that carry the blood out of the heart, which the blood flow comes from the heart, and then the veins carry the blood to the heart. There is a difference in the structure of these vessels that makes them also different. The arteries are very muscular. They are very strong. They have a strong muscle layers that helps them to push the blood and keep the blood going. When the arteries, which carry the nutrients and the oxygen to a muscle or to an organ of the body, because they are so big and they have a very thick layer of muscle, the oxygen and nutrients cannot leave it. So it has to go to another system, which is called the capillary system. Capillaries are very tiny, small vessels that have only one single layer of cells as their wall. So the oxygen and nutrients can easily exchange with the tissue around them. So these capillaries are the connecting parts that connect the artery and the vein together. The artery, the big artery that comes, it has a small branch. When it goes to a tissue or to an organ, they call it arteriole. And then many, many branches that turns into the capillaries. And the capillaries, they exchange the oxygen and nutrients, and their blood goes back. It wants to go to the vein. It first goes to a small part of the vein, which they call it a venule, and then it goes to bigger veins to go back to the body, to the heart. So whatever we have discussed so far is about the circulation of the blood in the body. We talked that the circulation starts with the heart, but first we need to go to the pulmonary circulation that goes to the lung, so we are able to have new oxygen in the blood. Once we have that new oxygen, then it goes to the other parts of the body and it comes back. So we have two separate circulations of or systems of the blood circulation in the body. We have the pulmonary circulation, which is responsible for oxygenating the blood, and then we have systemic system or circulation, which is responsible for carrying the oxygenated blood to every organ in the body. Thank you very much for listening. In the next chapter, we will discuss about procedures in the cardiovascular system.